Hey everybody, it's Jack with Future Pastimes, and a number of people have asked me about another update to the Kwisatz Haderach edition of Dune that is on GameFound. Um, and I think it's mostly out of desperation. They're desperate for Gale Force 9 to do another update. They have done the one update, which was back in February of this year, 2025. And so it's been a while, and that update was just a short, hey, we're gonna do this eventually. That's really all we can go into. And certainly back then, Future Pastimes still didn't really have very much information about what this campaign was going to entail, what was going to be all about. We knew there was going to be an expansion 4 because we designed it, and they did mention that in their launch video when they launched 3 game founds on the same day. Their Star Trek Ascendancy one, their Adventures of Conan one, and this one. And some people have asked, why did they announce this back then? I think it was just a sort of promotional partnership with GameFound that Gale Force 9 said, yeah, we're gonna be working with you on our next 3 big campaigns, and so it was all kind of wrapped up into that. So they didn't necessarily have to announce it, but they wanted to. I think it was part of it was just like, hey, we are working with GameFound on these. We've had some success with it. We think it's a good model to use. Whatever it all was part of that initial announcement, and so they knew that they were going to do some kind of deluxe super campaign for Dune. But beyond that, there hasn't been much to report. And we are in a better position, we being Future Pastimes, we now have a lot more insight into what is happening, and that is because Gale Force 9 definitely is revving up to start updating and to really get this thing moving. That's really all I can say. They don't really want me talking about any of the other stuff. But I do occasionally like to look at the comments, which I know that they look at as well, and just to kind of see what people are saying and, where they would like to see things going. So, like, we have Bumonic just wants another update, and this update is not really what they're looking for. That I understand, and so, but it's all you're gonna have to settle for it for now because, like I said, Gale Force 9, they're getting their ducks in a row. I think they want to be able, when they do updates, to have some stuff for people to sink their teeth into. I would love for them to, at least do like, hey, we are still here and we are working on this. It's not like, oh, we have we've got something else came up and we can't work on this. That's not the case. And Dominic again say, why can't we have a little more action here? An update or comment. Yeah, understandable. Frustrating. It's been more than a year as well. And then see a couple people on here, not necessarily these guys, speculating about why they think it has. And they speak like they know, but I know that they don't know. So don't necessarily take anything that people who are not obviously part of Gale Force 9, posting about that. I'd like to see an Italian version. As far as other languages, I know a lot of people have brought that up. I don't really know what's going to become of it, but here's what I will say about why language has fallen off a little bit, and it's just a numbers thing. They have done language versions of other games and expansions in the past, but it's hard to gauge what's the right number of those to do. And so far, I think it's for them, and I'm not just saying this is about Gale Force 9, this is a lot of other publishers that are working with doing translations in other languages. It's hard to gauge how many of those that they should print and put out there. And the case has been we did too many because they're not selling at the rate that one would hope. And it's just not the same ratios as they get with the English language, and that's because a lot of people who English is not their first language, it's their second language, and so they're content to buy. They're content enough anyway to buy it in English, especially if the translation is not being released at the same time, because it does a lot of times come out afterward. They'll be like, hey, we're doing this, and that it's often driven, well, this is a really successful game, so yeah, we will do a language. But with like newer stuff, It's not as obvious. And even with expansions, like the Dune expansions, 1 sold better than 2, and 2 is sold better than 3. And so they're trying to draw conclusions from that, like, oh, maybe the fans don't want any more factions. I don't know if that's necessarily true. Maybe part of it is just not as many people know who Ikaz and Moritani are, so they're not as invested in that. It doesn't seem like, oh, this is a must buy. Whereas Ixians and the Tleilaxu have been very well known for a while. And so here we got some interesting here. So this is Zanderson or X Anderson looking for some terminology here. They would love to see the Emperor faction called the Carino faction, since that's the house name. I don't have issues so much with fiddling with the names, and we'll get into that a little bit more here. But I think the Emperor faction, I would always keep it the Emperor faction. I'm going to change it to House Carino, because their identity, even though they are the Carinos, this is where their identity is tied up. This is the Emperor, and the Emperor is never going to not remind you that they're the Emperor, and everybody who works for the Emperor, and that's pretty normal. It's why King Charles is like, call me King Charles. None of this Charles of Windsor or anything like that. The Windsor family. They're like, no, it's the royals, it's the king. Here we have the emperor. So I think that would not change. Spicing Guild and Carino leader, so that each has an actual name. This is something I think is interesting. I don't know who Aurelius Venport or Norma Senva are. I'd have to, normally I'm pretty up to speed on the leaders and characters of this particular timeline. And we've got some, looking at some of these other here's, but we're looking down here, Cade, Bashar, Berseg. These are all ranks. They're not names per se. I think you would want to have somebody who is a Cade. And so we're talking, they have Cade Orlok. Again, that's somebody else I would need to look up. I know who some of these are. Wincisia Carino, that's interesting. Farad'n would not be a good choice, because he is not even a zygote. He's not even a, active sperm or whatever in this timeline. He's the generation of Paul's children. So I would not expect to ever see Farad'n here as a character for the Dune board game. We talk about Margot Lady Fenring, should be Lady Margot Fenring. But as is pointed out here, further down, maybe I scrolled past. Oh, yes. She signs her letters Margot Lady Fenring. So that's right out of the book. So that's how it showed up on that leader back in the 70s. I would not expect that to change either. I wouldn't be surprised if President Washington walked around saying, "You will address me as George President Washington." We don't know, probably not, but maybe. But in any case, I don't know that that's necessarily a good analogy, because of course we do have Margot Lady Fenring. We have that as canon. Wana Yui needs her faction icon. I would actually go back to Wana Marcus, because that's her name. And we do know about the Staben and Esmar art is swapped as not quite right. Here we have Jaded, kind of responding to and saying some of the same things that I'm saying. So Aurelius and Norma are navigators. So I don't know. I don't know that I would necessarily use those, because they're kind of on the same level as Edric. So I kind of agree there, and kind of agree with some of the other things. I don't know about changing their leader strengths, because here's the thing: it's not just about rank. You can have a leader who is a high-ranking person, but they have a low strength, and it's kind of why people are always asking, why is Duncan Idaho just a 2? He's a sword master, and it's not. That number is not necessarily how good you are in a battle. It's how good of a leader are you in a battle. The other forces are following you, and so I'm not to suggest that Duncan Idaho wouldn't be a great leader, but he was kind of a lone wolf character. He wasn't really put in charge of troops very often, And so we know Bagurni was, and Toofer is their master of assassins and in charge of their strategy. And Dr. Yui's a Yui, so, or not a Yui, a doctor. He's not out fighting battles, but his knowledge of anatomy probably could kill you pretty effectively if that's what he were after and he weren't imperial conditioned to do no harm and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's kind of an interesting. So even though Ramsham is only a captain and his mission failed, he is a Sardaukar, and I think that the Sardaukar don't have any qualms about following a Ramsham. They'll do what he says. So I don't know that necessarily would mess around with those numbers here. But this did kick off kind of an interesting conversation with a lot of people weighing in on this. So it's an area that I think is interesting and worth exploring. Why is Dune left on the side of the road? And it's because they're dealing with their Star Trek updates and da 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 da. A little bit, part of it. They said that they wanted to get Star Trek to a point where they could then put their focus back on Dune. So I'm guessing nothing until November. No, I don't agree. I think it'll be sooner than November. So this is somebody speaking, speculating, but like they know more than we know. Maybe they do, but I doubt it. So I think you can expect that the designers at GF9. It's mostly the designers at Future Pastimes, but there are some people at GF9 who are making decisions. But we're working as a team. Note the fixes that are made on the Landsrad website. So I'm familiar with the Landsrad of Las Vegas. They made some changes to the Richess and to the Ixian factions. It's interesting because again, some people, not necessarily these people, but some people, they kind of simultaneously don't change anything about Dune, but also we've changed some things. So it'll be interesting if there are some changes, how they react to those sorts of things. Do they find themselves more in the camp of the everything is sacrosanct, don't change anything, or no, we change things where you're making an improvement. So yeah, there's some. I've looked at these things, and there's some stuff that I think is pretty interesting, and some stuff that it's not for me. So Maple wants to know if this project is dead. It is not. So here we are having issues with another game on GameFound. I don't think that's here nor there. So showcasing they want to get their ducks in a row. I think that's a pretty clear motivator. And they want to be able to show stuff that's appropriate to be shown, and they want that stuff to be ready before they start showing it. I think that's largely what drives these sort of things. People asking about an advanced battle wheel, and this is a battle wheel that I've also looked at. Some interesting things there. I'm all in favor of let's take the battle wheel to the next level. It's doing a lot. No updates this month, and this was in at the beginning of the month. So not yet, but maybe the month is not over yet. No one needs to see the leader of a faction on the back of a screen. Better to have the faction symbol. I don't agree with that. I think when I'm looking around the table, I like seeing the heads of the houses on there. It's I think it's more immersion, more flavor than just the faction symbol. I think that's a little bit dry. You get the faction symbol as well. But yeah, I mean, this is all driven by these characters, and so I like seeing the Baron across the table, and I like seeing Liet Kynes, and I like seeing Prince Romber, who I wish looked more like a cyborg, but it is what it is. So someone at Mitzi made tokens of all these pieces. So you can see the faction marker. Someone else can see. I think maybe they're talking about like 3D faction symbols. I love that idea. I think that's a very cool idea. Every faction should have a way to generate spice. They do. You can kill other leaders, and that generates spice, and you can harvest it from the desert. So that's something that all factions can do. What I don't want to see is everyone's got a special income. That doesn't interest me that much. And if you can bring in the tech tokens as a way to get a little more spice in there. Maybe some rebalancing of a few factions would be a good idea. Some are too strong, some are a bit weak. I think the factions certainly should be looked at. And here, Turbally, Vando Turbally, is makes some of the same arguments here. Harkins have good board position. They have ornithopters. They can reach a lot of spice blows, and they can also extort spice. They've got usually more treachery cards, and they've got the traders. And in the early part of the game where nobody knows anything, it's a good time to extort. Please change the advanced combat system. It's the worst part of the game by far. No one likes it. Well, I think this is a little hyperbolic. Some people love it and would not agree that it's the worst part of the game. And even if they did, probably not by far. But I do believe that the advanced combat system is the clunkiest part of the game. And I think some of these other people come to the defense of advanced. They're like, I think this is a you problem. Sure. But yeah, it's not as easy as that, because when you're teaching this to somebody, you can start with that. It's just math. It's just that you're half and then they're full. But then you start to explain things like, oh, but here we've got the Emperor, and the Emperor screws it up. He screws it up for everybody. He makes it much more confusing. And again, it's not that a child can understand this, but it's really not elegant. And that's where people are like, I'd really much rather see an elegant system. And when you compare it to how elegant the basic, or what I like to just call the original rules, it's night and day. Captain Nelson wants to buy it now. That's great. But wait, somebody put out a thumper to try to get things going, hoping for German. We've talked about that. They want some stuff. Pledge Manager. Again, they had the delivery of the game. I don't know that it's a problem. I think it's the normal sort of thing. Plus, let's not forget about the whole tariff kerfuffle that we're still living in, and not just the tariffs, but the uncertainty, and like it changes all the time. And how long is it going to be this way? And we don't know. And just embarrassingly stupid that's going on. So that has had an effect on things. I think they want to, and then really what happens is because of the tariffs. It's not just, okay, this is how it's affecting Guild Force 9. They're like, oh, but it's created a panic within the pledge community where a lot of them are like, maybe I need to cancel my pledge. Can I cancel my pledge? Can I get less? How much, is going to be the shipping, the freight for all of this? And they're flooded with a lot of questions and uncertainty and panicking. And so this has created more work just by itself, apart from all of the actual work of dealing with this stuff. And they also, when they do these projects, they are when they say, yeah, we've contacted this company to do printing, and this one to do other manufacturing, and this one to do fulfillment or other delivery, they're locking in rates and prices well in advance. They're not just sitting around waiting for your Game Found campaign to end, and then they're saying, oh, okay, let's figure this out. Now, the actual numbers of things is not known. We don't know how many of these are we going to do, but there's still a lot of other stuff that you negotiate and you sign on the dotted line way before the campaign even launches. So And then when you have a monkey wrench thrown in the middle of it with the tariffs and like, oh yeah, and this part of the campaign is going to be hit by a 15% increase, but this part is being hit with a 50% increase or whatever it is, it wreaks havoc on these things. And let's not forget, at the end of the day, the publisher is publishing something not because we love gamers and we want to give them that stuff. I'm sure that they do, but they are also a business and they have to make money. And I think Gale Force 9 has done a pretty good job over the years with trying to find the sweet spot of this is how much we have to charge in order to make any money. But we don't necessarily want to charge so much more so we're making more money, and it's now absurd. So they're trying to come up with good margins. And Gale Force 9, they do a lot of IP games. And so the margins are smaller because they're paying fees on these things. So at least that's how I understand it. So like Legendary is getting their cut, and they may have said, we paid Legendary for the right to do this, but that's not where the story ends. Legendary gets more on top of that. So again, they're trying to come up with a competitive price point and negotiating all of those things. Same thing with Paramount on the Star Trek thing. They are dipping their beaks as well. And it's not like, oh, well, if you get hit with tariffs and you're ending up paying more, we'll reduce our percentage. That's not going to happen. So yeah, I think that's where we are with that. Still, a lot of people want some more information, and whatnot. New factions, although great. Let's fix the 12 we already have. So I don't know about Arthur Dane. I don't agree with you. Fix the ones we have. I think we can certainly adjust some of these, absolutely. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't have more factions, as I think we should have a lot more. I was recently reading about the Dune Awakening, which is that sort of real-time first-person shooter style Dune game, and someone was telling me that a lot of those Landsrat houses, or at least some of them, are popping up in there. Which appeals to me. At first, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to have time to invest in that. Also, my computer is not a real fan of running a game like that. I usually play games on the console, but it might be worth looking at because that does appeal to me. Yeah, and then we got a lot more. So let's load in. So Dreadfort agrees. Turbulate is like rebalancing retroactively is not feasible. Changing abilities and redesigning components might make old versions outdated. So, I mean, I guess you're talking about, I've got the 2019 edition, and you've got these changes, so they're not going to be compatible. That's certainly a distinct possibility. So, brace yourself, because the reality is we're living in a world where backwards compatibility is not necessarily that high of a priority, or it's just not practical. And so if you've got certain changes to factions, it might mean that you just need to get the new version of the faction. There's talk about, well, we want to we'll just wing it, or we'll print out something that explains the differences. And I suppose you can do that. I, for one, like to have everything, matching. I didn't like print and playing homebrew components for a game, but we're now in a paradigm where you can get stuff made that is pretty close. So it's hard to tell. And that's my preference. People who know me and my expansion sickness know that I came up with a lot of homebrew expansions for Cosmic Encounter, and I was really keen to play them, and the only way I could do it was I actually made an entire custom version of Cosmic so that everything was compatible and it all fit in there. I certainly don't expect Dune players to do that, although they did. They did before the 2019 edition came out. They were making their own copies of the game, but we're not certainly advocating for people to do that. And so I think that, this is an interesting discussion, what needs to be balanced. This is a subjective thing for a lot of people. As we saw above, some people want the combat system to change. And that could have a ripple effect. Well, like if you're changing that, it might mean you need to change Sardaukar, or you might need to change how the Fremen work, or you might need to change other battle advantages. Other people are like, let's rebalance, the how Karama works, and that's a whole bag of fish right there. And then just like let's make the some of the weaker factions a little more competitive. So we've heard a number of people talk about that sort of thing, and that's hard to ignore at that point. But that also can have a ripple effect. So you might say, why don't we do this? That's certainly going to make this faction stronger. But what effect does that have on these other factions? And so there's a lot of moving parts, and changing one thing will have a butterfly effect on a lot of things. And so I think you can say my group has made small tweaks, and so that's fine. But again, what's a small tweak for you might be a big tweak for somebody else, or this might be not enough, and you want to tweak many more things. So it'll be interesting to see where we land on this, and there will definitely be a lot of discussions. There will be people who are in favor of anything that's been done that is different, and I'm sure plenty who are like, anything that you've done that is different is just awful, and why would you do that? And we'll certainly get into it. Some small balance adjustments can be made without reprinting a large part of the game. Well, yes and no. Again, there's a lot going on in this game. You've got the faction sheets, you've got the leaders and their different values, you've got the treachery cards and certain effects on there, and then you have all of the other variants. So things like Nexus cards and discovery tokens and homeworlds and leader skills. And changing one thing will undoubtedly have an effect on other things. We're like, well, we need to change this now, and this is now way too powerful, or this has become obsolete. And so, yeah, it's quite a bit that would have to go into that sort of thing. And you start pulling on one thread, a lot else may come unraveled. Any major change will make older version obsolete, and GF9 sure don't want that. I don't know. Maybe they do want that. I think I remember I have almost the entire Arkham Horror First Edition. The only thing I'm missing are a couple of, I think, like miniatures that for like really rare effects. But it's a pretty complete. And then you come out with a second edition, which basically obsoletes all that stuff. And they have a third edition now, which looks utterly different. And I haven't had a chance to play that one, but it's a matter of I can't really use a lot of that stuff if I wanted to shift over to that. And I'm not opposed to like, well, I'll pick that up as well. It's just, for me, Arkham Horror is a game I play once every other year. So I think I'm fine still with the experience that I've got. If I were playing it a lot more, I might be more invested in switching over. I think the same thing, recently played Neuroshima Hex, and the version I have is not the most up-to-date version. But that's a game where they are more or less still compatible. A lot of it is just, they fix some, they change some iconography, or the components are a little bit different. But, I'm at the point where I'm like, I wouldn't mind picking up that other one. The same thing with Galaxy Trucker. I've got all of the Galaxy Trucker stuff. Then they came out with a new edition of it. And, there's some new stuff. They have an expansion for that. That's got a lot of stuff that I don't have. And while I could make it, I could homebrew that sort of thing. And I have homebrewed a lot of stuff for Galaxy Trucker. I think I'm just going to pick up that new edition and start using the new stuff and seeing what I can incorporate from the old stuff. But if it means I've just got to get all new stuff, that's where it's going to be. So here we have Dominic doesn't agree. Twilight Imperium. Oh, here we go. Twilight Imperium. Three. I mean, again, fourth edition. So Dune GF9 did get a buff for the Emperor. The Alliance and the BG were slightly changed when you go from the 79 edition to the 2019 edition. And some changes were made on there. A lot of times we kind of forget about that. And here we got Arthur Dane. It's like, make it obsolete if you need to, but keep it great. And it will result in negative comments. And here you have anything will result in negative comments, and that's true. That's how it goes. A sandworm faction, we saw that on Board Game Geek. I would not expect to see that, although we will have a funny story about that we'll talk about later on. Rotated maps names would be interesting. We did that with Dune Conquest, and I think ultimately that is a better way. It takes some getting used to, especially when you're so used to how the names are on there. But it's the sort of thing where, like, right now, if you're looking at the Dune board, one person gets to read all the names fine from where they are, and everyone else is sort of reading it sideways, upside down. And with the Dune Conquest board, everybody gets to see some of the words right side up, and the rest of them, were equally upside down because it's kind of following the curvature of the board. If it's not too late, more factions. Yeah, plus one more. I would love to see, if it were up to me, we would be adding 8 or 9 more factions. And you can tell from the way I say that we're not, but, maybe one day. I think this combat system is fine. Yeah, it's fine, and that's fine is fine, but it could be better. Adding factions is obviously wanted. I'm very interested in a Lance Rad module that would modify rules for the round. Yeah, maybe. We'll have a funny story to talk about that as well. I would like a better map. You could make one without plastic, like the game Yuan. Stackable tokens. Minis are not. I don't like the idea of minis. It's just taking up too much horizontal space. Stackable is great. I think the fact that they stack, and when we say stackable, we don't just mean you can put these one on top of the other. We mean that when you do, they stay that way, and when you move a stack, they stay stacked and they don't just tumble over, which currently happens way too much. Now we have a little interesting thing about game length and changing the win condition requirements. Again, like Yuan. It sounds to me like Rafi here should just play more Yuan, because I don't think this really would work for Dune. And something like this, a similar conversation came up on Board Game Geek, and there, I think, is some intelligent commentary that says here's how you might be able to make it work, but here's also the trouble with that. So it's the sort of thing that I think doesn't necessarily have to be in the official rules. This sounds like something worth homebrewing and testing out and seeing how it works. Making the games quicker. There's ways to do that. You can just not play 10 rounds. You can go, 7 rounds. If you can't win by then that's fine. I hope the Ixians get a small nerf. I think the non-Ixians should be able to ship to the hidden mobile stronghold. I will not expect to see that. But maybe, again, adjustments are not out of the... Tribbley thinks that they're incredibly well balanced. We don't want them to be dogpiled. And I would agree with that. I don't want anyone to be able to ship there aside from them. I don't have a problem with a lot of Ixian victories at the table. I just don't like the way the HMS works. I don't know. I don't know that they really fixed them as well. Again, this is a subjective thing. I've heard from a lot of people who say the Ixians are too strong, and I've heard from a lot of people who say the Ixians are not strong enough. And that, after that balances out, I feel like, they're probably just about right strength-wise. But there could be some ways to make modifications that doesn't necessarily change the strength, but just changes the gameplay. And that's something I think that's worth exploring. Allowing Atreides to see the ally swaps. Yeah, it's part of the reason that's an advantage is so that you're making it an advantage. All their powers in the early game, most of it certainly is. I think they're slightly too powerful early, and they do not need any additional compensation for those other nerfs. So there's a lot of, again, it's subjective. You ask 12 people about the Ixians, and you'll get 14 opinions. Add an extra type of weapon. Yikes! Yeah, man, we've got 3 already, and I think in the third category being special, there's a lot of unique gameplay there that I don't think would need to be complicated by yet another type. Regulate the game time. And I think that is going to be something that you will see in this fourth expansion that could answer that question for you. There's going to be ways it's going to make the game longer. And some people, they're like, yay. I mean, like those Lance Rad of Las Vegas guys, some of them want to go 15 rounds. So making the game shorter is not a high priority for them. But I think it's safe for me to say that one of our driving design themes for the fourth expansion was moving more in the direction of making Dune what you want it to be. And so there are going to be ways where you can speed up the gameplay or extend it and have the kind of experience that you want to get out of Dune, or make it more likely that you're going to have that kind of experience. So I think that'll be interesting to look at. I see a lot of what they think Fremen need help, Richess needs help. Yeah, I mean, what's interesting about factions like Richess and Chom and Ikaz and Mortani is they, if you're running a lot of numbers over these last couple of years, they probably don't have the highest win rate, and I think that's not necessarily the fault of the faction. I think we have over 40 years of figuring out how to effectively play those base game factions, and not nearly enough. So even though you're like, yes, we added Richess, but who played it? And how many times have they played it? And so I think if the 6 expansion factions had been the base game factions, and then we were adding in the base game factions now 40 years later as expansion factions, I think, with few exceptions, those later added factions would have a lower win rate. I think that's just, you can argue with me if you want. I just think that would be true, just because you haven't necessarily cracked the nut of how to effectively play them. However, that said, I've played Richess a lot, and I actually have a pretty decent win rate with Richess compared to just about any other faction. But it is a struggle, and they were purposely designed to be harder to play. And I think that there's probably some ways to make them a little more competitive without throwing away that theme of them having to work sort of under the pressure of, you don't necessarily have a lot of access to spice, or the trade-off is you are unloading useful and valuable items and commodities and whatnot in order to do that, which other factions don't have to resort to. So I think that that theme can still exist but be more competitive, and so take away from that what you will. And so, yeah, I mean, I could certainly go on and on, but what I wanted to do with this video was to sort of allay people's concerns that if anyone thinks, oh yeah, they've abandoned this or they've forgotten about it, that's not true. They are actively working on getting this ready for prime time, and there's a lot of really exciting stuff. I think most players will be very excited by what they're going to see. There's going to be some, uptight people who are like, I don't agree with this, or I don't love what it is. But I think, some of them might have been like, it doesn't matter what you do, I'm not going to like it. And maybe that's a little bit strong, but I think there's definitely people who are like that. And I think anyone who's like, oh, why did you change this, that, or the other thing? If that's what happens, the good news is go out and get the current version if that's what you prefer. It's still out there. Get it. And I can't recommend Expansion 3 enough, because I think it's the best one out of the 3. So even if you're like, I've never heard of Ikaz or Moritani, I don't even know how to say Ikaz, and we say Ikaz, so I think that works. But It's got great variants in there, most of which I use in every game now. So I'm always using Discovery tokens and Nexus cards, and I use the home world tokens even without the variant, but I do like that variant a lot because I think it makes your reserve forces so much more important, and I think it adds that layer of strategic depth to the game that is not missing, but is welcome. And so, yeah, if you're not interested in the next generation, no Star Trek pun intended, but then yeah, the good news is there's a great version of Dune already available, but there could be some amazing stuff, and you know, don't discount that there's going to be some very cool deluxe elements to this campaign. What they are, even I'm not 100% sure what they are. So I know that I've said we now know more than we did, and we do, but we still don't know everything. And you know, we're going to be surprised as well. And I trust that it's going to be a pleasant surprise. And it's one of those things that's subjective as well. If you go out to Etsy, there's a lot of really cool deluxe things out there, some of which I think are great and some of which I don't think are that good. And I've gotten my hands on most of them. And I've got videos on my channel, so be sure to check out my YouTube channel for more. There's a playlist called Dune Deluxe, where I've looked at some of these deluxe things. In some cases, you know, I'm happy with how they are and I'm using them now and I think they're great. In others, I'm like, this is pretty close. Here's what I would do differently. And even there, I think some of the designers of those components have said, yeah, you know what, you raise a good point. And they're thinking about what the next version of that component will be like. And in other cases, you know, they just don't agree that, you know, it has the downside or the defects that I've identified, or the, you know, explain why I think it's not quite what I want to see. But whatever we come up with, I'm sure that there's going to be even new and more interesting and probably even better in some ways Etsy or, you know, third party takes on things that I look forward to seeing as well. I think Dune is it's not the game that I've pimped out the most in terms of adding deluxe and unique and handmade or whatnot components to the game, but I have a lot, and it's a game that I like to deluxify, and I look forward to it. And I think we're going to have some cool stuff for here. It's going to really make, when you get it to the table, people are going to be like, whoa, check that out. So again, let me know in the comments any of your thoughts on that. Keep subscribing, or, you know, follow the Game Found here. We're almost at 24,000 people following. Of course, we want to get it out there to as many people as possible. I know that whenever I see something and I'm like, I didn't even know that campaign happened, I definitely would have pledged for that. So let your friends, let your gamer friends know, especially your Dune gamer friends or friends that are fans of the Dune IP, or people who they may have played or seen Dune, and maybe they were like, yeah, you know, I didn't really feel like I needed to get a copy, or I had an issue with this, that, or other, so I passed on it. Encourage them to follow this and to check it out and give it another look, because when this does launch, which will be imminent, I think it's going to win over a lot of new people as well as pleasing a lot of the current fan base. So there you have it. And thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon.